news. Wherever the big news story is happening, we're geared up to break it. TVC News, first with breaking news.
It's Friday. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for joining us this morning on the show. I am Nifemi Oguntoye. The year is merely 8 days old, but it's recorded some very historic moment. The events of Wednesday, 6th of January, that saw Trump supporters invade the Capitol building, overtake police officers, all in the means to perhaps stop congressmen from counting the Electoral College votes and also certifying Joe Biden's victory in the much talked about historic November election, is now being considered not only a rude shock, but an affront on perhaps one of the oldest and largest democracies of the world. The building, that particular building, we're told, houses the country's two legislative bodies, the House of Representatives and the Senate, and it was breached for the first time on Wednesday since 1814. And that was when the British attacked it and set it on fire during the War of 1812. Now, perhaps what makes this even more interesting is the fact that that incident, they call it an armed insurrection incited by the sitting president of the United States. There's a lot to talk about, and there are updates that will let you know in the course of this year. Of course, Congress went ahead with that certification. We now know that Biden's win as president has been certified by congressmen. It happened 3:41 a.m. local time yesterday, and that ceremony ended with an announcement by Vice President Mike Pence, who went by the book in conducting the event, that Biden had won with 306 electoral votes to 232 for Mr. Trump. We've also seen a video speech by U.S. President Donald Trump, and now saying that he's committed to an orderly transition. Well, he has not accepted that this election is free and fair. He's still holding firmly to that claim, but he's saying that the new administration will be inaugurated on the 20th of January, and he's now calling for healing and reconciliation. Another update is the fact that for the second time we're seeing Democrat lawmakers asking for the impeachment of the U.S. president. They've called for him to be removed from office after the violent invasion of the Capitol by a mob of his supporters. Now, there's a lot of questions as regards how that will happen. How do they get the supports of the Democrats in the House? And some are asking that the 25th Amendment now needs to take place. But let me turn attention to my guest this morning as we dig deeper to what is now being considered perhaps the most historic incident in the U.S. In the brand new year. Curtis Adigba is a lawyer and foreign affairs analyst, and he joins us this morning. Good morning.
Thanks for having me.
Happy New Year to you, and thank you for coming.
Same to you.
All right, so it's amazing what we saw happen on Wednesday, but many are saying that it is what it is. I mean, we've had the president's position since November, calling the process a fraud, and we've also followed through with all of his tweets and the fact that he's saying that this is not going to happen. But let me begin with your reaction, to all of this.
I was stunned. It shook me to my core. I never expected that from a sitting president. Look, it is normal for someone to take issues with election. But then there are processes for ventilating your grievances, and he's exhausted all that. He's gone to court over 90 times, including courts manned by judges he appointed as president. They said he had no case. He couldn't make a convincing case that he won the election and it was overturned in favor of Joe Biden. And then he tried to intimidate assemblies of some of the key states, like in Wisconsin, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, inviting members to the White House and then trying to lean on them to change the outcome. They couldn't do it because what most people do not understand is that elections in America are not centralized. Elections are conducted by local officials, and then they are tallied by networks and announced. So you have 50 elections being conducted at the same time in different parts of the country. And for him to say that, look, some people came together and overturned or change figures, he has to prove that. But notwithstanding that, even in states that are ruby red, Arizona, never been won since 1996, has not been won by a Democrat. Georgia, 1992, that Clinton won. No Democrat has won in the place. But of course, before the elections, the polls were very clear that he was hemorrhaging in numbers because he turned off suburban voters who are women who couldn't stand his rhetoric and the way he was behaving. And so we knew that he was going to lose this election. He knew he was going to lose the elections. His internal polling of the party and his campaign showed clearly he was lagging behind.
But he still had 71 million plus votes, the second highest in the history of America.
Against 80 plus million votes.
So there are some who would say that take away the Black Lives Matter protest, take away his nonchalant attitude to COVID-19, he would have won this election hands down.
You know what I say to people? Trump defeated Trump. Trump defeated Trump. Trump was a force of nature, given the fact that many Americans were holding on to his word, like the Bible, for survival. Don't forget he's a populist. He harnessed the grievances of a large swath of the country in coming to power by telling them, look, I'm your savior. They're taking away your country from you. They're taking your culture. They are undermining your race. And I've come here to stop all that. So Trump was going to win. But then COVID happened. And mismanagement of COVID was a key factor in his losing. But beyond that was his lack of empathy and his inability to tap into the currency of racial tension and feelings in the country. Instead of calming things down, he stoked tension. Look at when George Floyd died. And the country was looking onto the president to calm things down. He inflamed things. You know, he came out and said, look, when the looting starts, the shooting starts. And he said, look, he didn't care at all. In fact, and from Bob Woodward's book, Rage, we got to understand when Bob raised the issue with him, he said, no, he's not given to such nonsense. And that Bob drank Kool-Aid. So this was his problem. He didn't think that he needed black voters to win the election. He thought that if he ride his base enough, you know, the cultural war that he's been stoking for years, and then he's stoking and counting so much on the working class in America, the non-college educated voters in the south of the country. He felt that with that he was going to win.
Let's take a look at the latest steps that he has taken. He has now committed to an orderly transition, stating categorically that there will be an inauguration on the 20th of January. He's also asking that there must now be healing and reconciliation. Is that enough to calm nerves at this time?
You see, you don't throw bombs into a house and at the same time calling for peace. That's what he's doing. Look, as the president, the job of a president is, first of all, to keep your head while others are losing theirs. He carries the weight of the country on his shoulders. And so he's also the empathizer-in-chief of the country. But he inflamed the whole thing. Look, he was out there for over 2 months, inflaming passion. Say, oh, this was a steal. They took it from us. We won this election by thousands of votes. Look at the case of Georgia, for instance. Georgia is a ruby red state. Georgia has a Republican governor, a Republican Secretary of State in charge of the election. They conducted this election. They came out. They said he lost. He said they didn't lose. They did a recount. He lost. He insisted on the second recount. They had counted all the votes. He lost. There was another challenge in the court. He lost. But in spite of that, he still put a call to the Georgia Secretary of State, who is a Republican, who has contributed money to the Trump campaign, trying to push him to find 11,779 votes so that he can overturn Biden's lead in the state. So with this kind of behavior, telling people who cannot separate facts from fiction that he won, and they stole his victory. And he said, look, they stole your victory, not mine. It's ours. Don't forget that he makes himself to look like the champion of the cultural war And so that's where the problem is. And because these people cannot separate the fact from the fiction, they followed every word that he spoke. Don't forget that 2 hours to the rally in Washington on Wednesday, he said, our people are coming into Washington, and the world will see what they are capable of doing. Meanwhile, there is a video out now trending where he was holed up in a place with his sons, their daughters, and the girlfriend of his son, Kimberly Guilfoyle. And they were celebrating as the mobs were invading the house. So for him to turn around and say, look, there will be transition of power, I mean, it's not an achievement. He can't even stop it. The fact is that he lost an election, he's a lame duck president, and if he's not careful, between now and the 20th, there will be a historic second impeachment, the first time in the history of America.
Exactly what I want us to talk about now. So his opponents at both houses of Congress want him removed again. But it's not very likely that they will get enough support from Republicans. They needed a 2/3, for instance. We've seen a handful.
No, you don't need a 2/3 in the House
to
impeach him. You just need a simple majority to impeach him. Don't forget that in 2019, when he was impeached, there was no 2/3 majority. However, when you impeach, it goes for a trial in the Senate, and that's where you need 2/3 to remove him from power. Because the Senate must try and convict him with the Chief Justice of the United States presiding. Now, that's where he can be removed. Now, we've had 3 impeachments before now. Andrew Johnson in 1868, Bill Clinton in 1998, and him in 2019. None of them, of course, were convicted by the Senate, and so they went to finish their terms. But in this particular instance, given the groundswell of opinion against him, if he's ever impeached by the House, he will be convicted by the Senate and removed from office.
Another option is the 25th Amendment, which allows the Vice President to step up if the President is unable to perform his duties. But they will need Pence and perhaps 8 other members of his cabinet to have that done. How possible, how feasible is that, given the position that the Vice President has taken in the past few days?
Well, you know the Vice President is a peacemaker. No one has shown loyalty to his boss, more than Mike Pence. But Mike Pence was in a bind, and he's got to do what is right for the country. He knows that. He chose to follow in the footsteps of Al Gore, who lost the presidency by 537 votes to George Bush, and still had to preside over Congress to rectify the victory of Bush. Pence had to do that. But Pence also knows that he needs to calm things in the country, and he will not take further steps to inflame the situation. And that is why he's avoiding the key operatives like the Speaker, the Minority Leader of the Senate, Chuck Schumer, and all the members of his party who are calling for the invocation of the 25th Amendment. Now, the other issue is we don't even know whether the cabinet will remain in place in the next few days. As of course, you probably would have heard that last night, yesterday, Ellen Chao, the Transportation Secretary, who is also the wife of Senator Mitch McConnell, resigned. Betty DeVos said she had reached an inflection point and also resigned last night. Other cabinet members are also resigning. Matt Pottinger, Deputy National Security Advisor. Stephanie Grisham, Chief of Staff to the First Lady and former Press Secretary. So there's exodus. We're also hearing that Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State, is on his way out. Mick Mulvaney, former Acting Chief of Staff, resigned yesterday also. And then people like Robert O'Brien, National Security Advisor, is also thinking of resigning. But they have been prevailed upon to stay so that they don't derail the entire system.
There are just about 12 days to the expiry of his administration, the expiration of his administration. Is there enough time to see this impeachment through? And what statement do you think that Congress would be making with that effort?
Look, impeachment can be abridged, an abridged form. They don't, in 2019, they took days and weeks to gather evidence and all that. They don't need that step right now because the evidence is there for everybody to see. The statement that he made, his tweets, and even when he attempted to calm things down, he still inflamed passion by saying, you guys are good people, you have cause to do what you have done, okay, we want this thing, they stole it from us, but you can go home now. So Congress don't need to look for evidence like they did when he had to make that phone call to the Ukrainian president, and then you have long testimonies. This was clear for everybody to see. So if Congress want to impeach him, they can announce article of impeachment today, they are meeting today, and tomorrow they can vote to impeach him. It's that simple. Now, then the matter goes to the Senate, who has to convict before it can be removed from the office.
So we've seen U.S. been ridiculed by, in China, for instance, they have, compared what happened there with the protests in Hong Kong and the rest. And I believe that congressmen will want to make a statement. But we are told that at least 4 people have died.
5.
Okay, now 5.
A policeman died last night.
And then close to 68 have been arrested. Let's talk about the action of the police, which have now come under huge scrutiny, with officers facing criticism for failing to stop the rioters from breaking in. There is a quote here from President-elect Joe Biden. "Nobody could tell me that if it was a group of Black Lives Matter protesters yesterday, they wouldn't have been treated very differently than the thugs that stormed the Capitol."
I was ahead of Joe Biden. I wrote yesterday, early in the morning, that no one can tell me that race was not a factor in the response of the cops. Because if it were a Black Lives Matter group, they couldn't even go near the Capitol. They couldn't. You saw what happened when the president ordered the National Guard to crack down on the black protesters. So the question is, how were they given the opportunity to get to the point where they got to? And the cops couldn't do anything until the vice president had to call the acting secretary of defense to mobilize the troops and the Metropolitan Police. And that's why the sergeant at arms has resigned from the House. Chuck Schumer has said, look, the one in the Senate has to go. If it doesn't, by the time he takes over as Senate Majority Leader, he's going to be fired. So they're calling for heads. And this is where our country is slightly different from what it's. People are being held to account for failing the country. And we need to do that. Now, you talked about China and Russia and other countries who are gloating. Of course, this is expected. Don't forget that the U.S. is a political and economic model in the world. And where they go, people follow. Now, they used to lecture us on what we should be doing. And like I called for, at the point when Trump started making all the noise,
that's right.
I called for a government of national unity to be formed in America. That's what they will prescribe to us. But then you must give it to them. They have their institutions that are working, powerful institutions that are pushing back against this president. You can imagine that after the invasion, 1 or 2 hours later, Congress reconvened, and they had to finish their business. That couldn't have happened in so many countries in the world.
And that is how U.S. responded that makes them a bit different. Because I have seen a lot of analogy, similarity between what happened in Washington, D.C. with events in the third world country. But we saw, just like you mentioned, that Congress went ahead with certifying Biden's victory. The president's social media were suspended almost immediately by Facebook and Twitter. We also hear that officials responsible are also resigning. The sergeant at arms has resigned.
Yeah.
And report says that the U.S. Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sund is also resigning effective 16th January.
They are primarily responsible for the security of the Capitol, and they failed to discharge their duty. Basically, they failed because they should have imagined for a moment that if thousands of people were going to pour into Washington to protest, while congressmen were sitting, that there was a possibility of them wanting to go to that place.
Let me hold you for a minute, Curtis Adegba. Joshua has called in from Iriwolide in Ogun State. Good morning, Joshua.
Yeah, good morning, Nufemi, and good morning to Curtis. Happy New Year to him.
Thank you.
It's a laughing day for me. I mean, I've been laughing, and I enjoy what is happening. Because it is a wake-up call for us to allow our nation to grow. Nigeria needs to grow. The years that have been mentioned that U.S. has existed and all that they have done so far tells us that we're just a teething baby. Nigeria is a baby. We need to allow our nation to grow. There's no place like home. Whatever analysis people give, what Trump has done is the face of America. You see, they have a local politics, a local community that they have cleverly shielded away from the world because they have a very powerful media. So the media shows us what they want us to see. Now social media has exposed them. Trump is exactly the way America is.
I don't think so.
So there's no way of explaining anything. We cannot call for sanction against the U.S. because of their military might. But we should let them know that they misbehaved. They goofed. They did exactly what they call the third world to order in terms of being guilty, whatever. They have shown a bad example and we shouldn't follow them. The truth is, what happened in 5 people dying in that was worse than what happened in NSAS. And somebody was calling for an end to Nigeria. Nigeria is a banana republic. Nigeria I mean, we call our nation all manners of, because we use U.S. to benchmark ourselves. This is U.S. of Trump, is the president, and that is the face of America. If they repair themselves, fine. But that is what America is. And we should start checking our own democracy now to do a homegrown thing that will help us. God help Nigeria. We are a good nation. We need to grow ourselves. Thank you, beloved.
Thank you, Joshua, for your contribution. Mr. Adigba seemed to disagree with you on some issues.
I think Joshua needs to know that human beings are all the same all over the world. We have the same tendencies. We respond to issues almost the same way. The difference, however, is the power of the institutions that help to hold back our dark impulses. And that's what you saw in America. The institutions at that moment couldn't hold back. And that's why what happened. Number 2, democracy is fragile. It needs tending to. And so you have to have one generation of leaders to another tending to the same democracy, maintaining and preserving the guardrails. So if anybody comes and then he wants to shatter the guardrails, the institutions are there to prevent that from happening. Now, it doesn't mean that America is not exceptional in terms of how they've run their country and how they have done things. But this is a dark spot on their history.
So you look at that video of the protest at the Capitol building, and, you know, it shows similarities of what we've seen in third world countries. For instance, the moment where shared protesters stormed the racks in parliament in 2016, even in Libya, where armed men, you know, took over parliament and all of that. But the conversation, there's a debate now as to whether this reflects the fact that America isn't unique after all, or it is just what we see happen under President Trump.
America is unique. And this is one point I think we need to state clearly. African leaders and other world leaders must not use this as an example to continue in impunity. The fact is that America is the greatest model of politics and the economy in the world. That does not mean they're perfect. America, of course, will tell you about America's exceptionalism. They'll tell you that there is a city on a hill that cannot be hidden, that America is an idea, progressively evolving. And that's true. America is the closest thing that human ingenuity has established as a nation. That we must give to them. But don't forget for a moment that countries do evolve. And what we are seeing is as a result of attempt at populism built in America. You know, in 2016, Donald Trump was a shiny object. He checked all the right boxes. He had the right rhetoric. For those who wanted to listen to him, he talked about immigrants being criminals, rapists and all that, coming to rape our country and all that.
Building the Great Wall. Let me hold you just another minute to take Ibrahim's call from Kaduna. Ibrahim, are you still there?
Yes, I'm still around.
All right, please go ahead with your contribution. Thank you for waiting.
You see, the issue of Trump and the American saga, you see? Oh, yes, I'm around. All right, this issue that people are discussing, it is very, very unique. America issue and the saga, not any other thing. American Trump have exposed them really the way the first caller has spoken. America, they have demonstrated as us. God have exposed them. So it is right time for we, the Nigerians, to design our own politics the way it should be.
It's all right.
You see, we should try to do our own democracy the way it should be. And for us, some of our Nigerians who like to run to the Americans for saving, they should know what to do now. Is it the place they want to go and run? America is not a good example for us again. We should try to design our own way and move this country forward. And thank you very much for hearing my voice. Bye.
Thank you, Ibrahim, for your call all the way from Kaduna. We're going to get back to the issues of what the African continent can learn from how U.S. responded to the events of Wednesday. But let me take you up very quickly on the U.S. model. So America used to have a moral standing, or perhaps a facade of it, that makes it play.
They still have it.
That still makes that makes it play a significant role in, building peace and helping third world countries out. But there are people who would say this is a reflection of, a deteriorating America in recent history. And they seem to have a point. They are making reference to, for instance, the invasion of Iraq under fabricated pretenses, the locking up of alleged terrorists in Guantanamo Bay without due process. It's a long list of issues. The continued support of dictators, as long as it supports the American interest.
Torture.
How do you react to this?
Look, there is the ideal, and there is the practice of the idea. So, and there are gaps between what the promise is and the practice. And that happens in every country of the world. America is not laying claim to perfection. America is saying, rating us on the curve. We are better than most countries in the world. And don't forget that the things you mentioned, a large swath of Americans came out openly to criticize these things. For instance, the invasion of Iraq. More than half of the country were opposed to that. But the then President Bush said he had intelligence, and then he was able to move the Congress to give him the authorization. Now, when you talk about the invasion of other countries, there are a lot of Americans who were opposed to it. Torture of prisoners, so many Americans who were opposed to it. One of them, of course, late Senator John McCain, who was always speaking. Even President Obama.
The same way there is multiple opposition to what is wrong with the Nigerian government.
Yes, but it's, okay, go on.
But let me hold you a minute. Let's take Yakub's call. Good morning, Yakub.
Yeah, good morning, Nifemi. Then Mr. Curtis, good morning, sir.
Morning.
Is it Nifemi? I totally agree with Mr. Joshua coming from Holiday. He has said it all. But some lesson that we need to learn in this country, especially our politicians, is that if a little thing happens in this country, they always rush to American embassy here, begin to say all sorts of things. Look at the saga. You see, America, I'm waiting what CNN and then all these Amnesty International is going to say concerning this American issue as of today. And then Donald Trump coming back and says that he's going to leave the powers of assembly and all that. He has no choice because there's not anybody behind him again. Some of his evidence has decided to resign from the cabinet. He has no anybody again rather than do the needful. But I totally agree with your guest, Mr. Curtis Adiba. You see, what makes America different from this country is one thing. One thing is that the institution of America is working. I didn't be in our country, our institution is working. A people can look into a senator that did the wrong thing and get him arrested without nothing happen. It could have been better for us. If our institution working, all these are politicians who do the right thing. If you know that if you draft against the traffic, you are going to court. You will be able to do the need, you will be able to do the right thing. What's different there is just because their institution is working and perfect. I'm looking for a day that our institution in this country, from police, army, and every organization in this country works like America, so that every one of us will behave well. Thank you, good man. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Yakub, for your contribution.
The National Assembly in Nigeria was invaded some years ago, and they made stolen. Has anybody been arraigned in court or arrested for that purpose? But we've had 69 arrests in the last 2 days already, and counting. So people will be brought to justice.
Okay, so I understand your point of view, and I've also heard people jokingly say, oh, America now needs to learn from Nigeria, yes. From what President Jonathan did when he lost election in 2015.
Trump needs a lesson in grace.
Exactly the point I'm trying to make, that I hope we're not going to mistake Trump's arrogance, you know, for a failing system, because we've seen how the American system rose to, you know, correct what appears to be a personal mistake in this regard.
See, and that's the point I was making, that one incident cannot define America. The country has gone through civil wars, it's gone through some terrible but they always bounce back. And that's what Joe Biden said. He said there is nothing that we come together that we cannot achieve. And for those Nigerians who are saying, you know, America is ended because of the invasion, just one invasion of the capital, I think they're just reaching conclusions that America will spring a surprise. America will come back from this stronger, because institutions will be reinforced to stand against these things, to prevent these things from happening in the future. That's where we miss the point. For instance, look at the president, Trump, who came and decided to destroy all the norms of the presidency. But what happened? Key members of that cabinet that were tagged as enablers, John Kelly, Chief of Staff, former Secretary of Homeland Defense, John Bolton, National Security Advisor, H.R. McMaster, National Security Advisor, Rex Tillerson, former Secretary of State. All right? So many top officials had to leave. James Mattis said, look, I cannot continue to serve in this government, and all that. So you had institutions always pushing back and trying to hold him.
Unfortunately, we hardly see that happen in Nigeria.
Yeah,
I mean,
so we don't see
people living on principle basis, especially the points of resignation when you're falling short of responsibility.
Who would have thought that Bessie DeVos, one of the staunchest allies of the president, we issued a statement last night and said, I have reached my inflection point. Kids are watching, and this is not the picture of America we should be presenting to them. Therefore, I am leaving. That won't happen. In fact, supporters of that government will say she's a traitor.
Another reality for America now is how sharply divided the people are in their numbers behind ideologies that Trump represents and that Biden and Harris are also lashing on. Do you say the incoming administration, whichever way they come in, whether Trump gets impeached or not, do you see them have the capacity to unite America along these lines? Okay,
so America has always been divided along political lines. You are either a cultural, you are either a conservative, or you are a liberal. And in between are centrists. That's why you have people who are independent, who are called purple voters. You have swing states. Those states can swing to blue or swing to red. So that division will always be there. But every time you find a political figure who can shift from the extreme left or right to the middle, that's right, and try to bring people together, he or she wins. That's what we have seen. There is nothing that we hear that permanent division, but it can be mended, or the gap can be bridged for a common purpose to be achieved in America. And they have done that over the years. Because you see, what is happening in America is that America is drifting to the right and to the left. Okay? So when you listen to somebody like Bernie Sanders, it tells you government should have a bigger role. In other words, government should be involved in healthcare for people, should provide housing. It doesn't care where the person comes from. Once you are on American soil, government has a responsibility or duty to you. You find right-wingers on the other side saying, listen, if you are not supposed to be in our country, you are not supposed to be in our country. You are not entitled to anything. The market should drive almost everything, healthcare and all that. So if you don't have money, you cannot afford insurance, you are sick, go and die. So these differences will always be there. That's why you have those who are conservatives and those who are liberal. However, even within the liberal group, okay, you have moderates as well as moderates in the conservative group. So you have people who culturally don't worry about so many things that the people on the right worry about. Look, for instance, you have a moderate who says, look, the issue of gay is not my problem. I don't care who they love. But they're also concerned about the size of government, their physical They are physically conservative. They don't want government to play too much role in their lives.
That's right.
So these differences will continue to exist. But what America tries to do every time is to find individuals who can bridge this gap. Not entirely eliminate it, because it's impossible to eliminate.
Let me take you on because we have to let you go to accommodate the next guest. Perhaps one of the biggest stories on the dailies in Nigeria today is the fact that staff of Nigeria's National Identity Management Commission have now started a nationwide indefinite strike in protest of what they call poor allowance and working conditions amid the COVID-19 pandemic. We've always had this issue when government came up with a policy of asking people to get NIN within a limited frame of time, given what they have done in the past 6 years when this initiative began. What are your thoughts as regards this latest development?
My first thought is this: it's worrisome that this is the way our citizens respond to issues. Poor allowances, old allowances, they didn't start last week. They had been there. These guys could have gone on their strike even before now. At the moment, we have people pouring into different centers, trying to comply with the directive of the government. And that isn't the right time to do this. So basically what they are doing is holding fellow citizens to ransom in trying to get their entitlement from the government, when they could have done that at any other time. And so this is the difference in attitude, you know, between our citizens and some others in other parts of the world. You've got to preserve the government first. You've got to preserve the country. You have to think about your fellow human beings. So now what will happen is either government is going to extend the period or government is going to negotiate with them.
The government has to extend because it's not feasible to have... I
don't know.
To have close to 160 million Nigerians do that in a matter of weeks.
But there are those who tell you that, I've heard people say to me, why are people complaining? After all, we all have this number. We've registered, we have accounts. And I say to them, how many Nigerians have accounts in bank? How many Nigerians have BVN? If the fact that, you see, people tend to forget that because they live in Lagos and they can access almost everything they want. The man in my local village in Ugboko, somewhere in Benue State, has got all the access to. They don't understand that is not the situation.
We have to leave it there. Curtis Atigba, lawyer, foreign affairs analyst, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us on the program this morning. 1,565, that's the latest number coming in from NCDC, one of the highest cases, daily cases of COVID-19 we have recorded. I think it was on Wednesday, we had over 1,600. The second wave is staring us right in the eye, but there has to be something we can do about it. I'll be joined by a public health expert after this break.
Join me, Precious Amayo, as I bring you news from the epicenter, where it happens and when it happens, staying on top of every breaking story, minute by minute, right at the hour where the city gets busy and just before it sleeps. We're live from every angle with objective insight and analysis. TVC News, first with breaking news.
Coronavirus is still here, spreading in an unprecedented manner. And now, more than ever, it's time for us to be on our guard and keep ourselves safe. As life struggles to return to normal, still maintain social distance, avoid crowded places, wear your face mask properly, and constantly wash your hands with soap and running water. Keep your hands away from your eyes, nose, and mouth. If you feel unwell with fever, cough, and sore throat, call for medical attention. Or you have any sudden loss of smell and taste, seek help immediately. Coronavirus is no death sentence. We can stop this virus from marching any further.
And thanks for staying with us. Pascal Achunine is a public health expert, is joining us on the second half of the show. Good morning and thank you for coming again. Happy New Year.
Same to you.
All right, so the total...
Thanks for having me.
Yes, the total number of confirmed cases in Nigeria as at yesterday is now 95,934. Unfortunately, we have lost 1,330 people to COVID-19 related complications. What do you think is responsible for many people who still believe that this is a scam?
have said this several times, and I want to strongly restate it, is trust capital. The people do not believe, many do not trust what comes, communications that comes from stakeholders who manage this, especially the government. And my take is that at this stage, government must come up with a clear feedback of why are people not believing? Because as I speak, over 60% of the persons who are in crowded places, in typically crowded places, still have this view is a scam, or that nothing will happen, or it's for big men, or it's a channel government is making, people in government are enriching themselves. So 2-3 things I feel that the government must do. Number one is disease risk communication. Make people know the risks people have already been exposed to, deaths, implications, because if one dies of COVID-19, your relatives won't have access to connect with you in the normal way we honor the dead here. And once somebody is taken away from home, you're infected with COVID-19, more or less you've lost it, and in the event that the person dies. And from the words of the governor of Lagos State, he says that 10% out of everyone that tested positive end up in ICU, and some do not make it alive. And I've also seen the Alibaba's video that went viral, how many who he was in room 4, and many in the other rooms, he was seeing this person taken away, he wakes up, he sees that, oh, this one is gone, this one is gone. So disease risk communication needs to be strengthened. But I also think that the government must recalibrate in the way and manner it communicates. So it's not going to only look at information given out by the government, because there have been so many instances that messages that come from the government either are so bitter for people, or people have seen that there is a disconnect between what is done and what is said. So government must identify, or the stakeholders must identify, credible partners who connect with the grassroots. Because the issue here now, the elites, most elites believe that this is critical. But the grassroots people feel that is a scam.
You know, but there's also this public perception that government speaks with both of the mouth. On one hand, we're shutting down religious organizations, but our markets are a mess. On the other hand, on the front page of the papers today, you hear NIPSI workers complaining of lack of protective equipment, and that government hasn't come out clean as regards the issue of COVID-19 cases, you know, amongst workers in that particular sector. We know what the issue is. How do you come up with a timeline for people to register in the midst of a second wave? Is it not counterproductive?
There are times that people in public service need to act like statesmen. This is the best time to do that. You do not need to be rigid. So if there was a timeline that on or before 18th of January, everybody must secure their NIN registration, and we are faced with a very ferocious second wave, what is required is to be flexible and sensitive to say, okay, this is not as destructive and critical to the nation as much as registration. Yesterday, the US lost 4,000 lives to COVID-19. God forbid we get to such a situation. NIN registration will be very, very immaterial to such emergency. So government, and from statistics, between the time the directive came from the Minister for Communication until the end of December, the average number of persons who registered were less than 100,000, plus or minus 150,000. What it meant is that to register 50 million people, it will take minimum of 6 months. To register 150 million people, it will take over a year.
No, Mr. Trinidad, the question we should ask is, how many have they registered between 2014, when this initiative began, and 2020? It's less than 50 million.
Less than 50. Less than 50, clear.
It's less than 50 million.
We can achieve all of that at a time when we have a critical emergency. So first of all is that policy needs to be revisited, relaxed, so to say, and a longer extension be given, and also find other channels banks and others.
You also don't want to talk about the financial implication, the kind of stories we're hearing that Nigerians have been exploited by, staff members of the NIMSI just under the guise of having an NIN.
Yes, because if many have shared the feedback that they have been to the centers and because they did not want to part with money, they had to stay months, perhaps years before it got to their turn. Some will get there by 4 a.m. So I am not, and there has been several clarification from officials of NIM that nobody should part with money, there's no bribe. But, what is said is different from what is done. And it is, do we have enforcement? So what is critical here is that the laws are there. Perhaps the government's move is actually to be, the government surely means well, but are they enforcing? Do they have, is there a political way to enforce? I gave an illustration the other day while on this platform that Uganda is not a first world country, but they enforce. So if governments, as they did with the people whose passports were recently published, who violated the COVID protocols and published for 6 months they will be unable to travel, that demonstrates that they are serious. So if there is a sanction, and it will send a clear message that they are not just talking, they are doing it.
Absolutely. So we hear that the federal government will soon procure about 100,000 vaccines in a matter of weeks. A second phase would include 30 million of all of the certified vaccines. We have Moderna, there is Sputnik 5, there is, what's it called? Pfizer and the rest. But interesting, or rather interesting enough for many Nigerians is the category of those who are going to be first partakers. Health workers who are at the front line. They also talk about people in leadership.
And in leadership.
Yes, leadership. And then perhaps elderly people with underlying ailment. On the front page of the Nigerian Tribune this morning, we hear that Buhari Oshibajo may be vaccinated on live television. Let's talk about the impact that is going to have, how much that will achieve at a time where there are lots of conspiracy theories about these vaccines.
Well, it's important to clarify that the vaccine does not purport or validate some of the conspiracy theories. It is like every other vaccine we have taken from childhood to this date. So I want to, the little I have seen, the much I know, there is a debunk that the vaccine is meant to actually prevent and it to work. So the conspiracy theories around it is not valid.
But is there a sense to which Nigeria can independently and scientifically prove that? It is one thing to say, oh, this drug has been certified by the WHO, and that is why we think it is safe for Nigerians to take. But it's another thing to say, oh, we have an independent body like NAFDAC or whatever relevant agency that will pass this through, a standard procedure and come out to say, oh, we can now say with scientific proof that there are no side effects.
They are the side effects. Okay, first, Nigeria, it is as a sovereign nation, it will add to our national pride that we will conduct some tests to verify. But I have also come across persons who are close to me, who are not in Nigeria, who are taking the vaccine, and they are hell and heart. It was just a little temporary fever or pain at the point of they administering the vaccine. But I also think that we have a crisis, so it should have been different if this happened in 2019 and 2018, when this vaccine, when this second wave on, the virus was not here. But we have a virus that is clearly increasing. The number you just wrote out is 1,500. And it is almost getting to like 7,000 to 10,000 per week. And there are fatalities. So first of all is reduce the chances of deaths. And as the president, vice president and other people in top level in government, demonstrating that they are surely expressing that this thing is real.
Okay.
But beyond those in political office, it's also important to identify other credible Nigerians who would say, yes, this is genuine. And that will also clear the air around the conspiracy theory, because that is not only good to limit it to those in political office. to be those who do it on live television, on live camera, is very important.
Because of the trust deficit
because
that
of the trust
deficit. Because we had that challenge with polio vaccines and the other vaccines that have come in the past. So we are hearing now that Nigerians wishing to travel out are presenting fake test results. And this is not only, damaging government efforts, locally, but also damaging the, the integrity, the image of the nation outside the country. How did we get there? Get here, and what do you think had been done differently?
It still comes back to the will to enforce. So if 1, 2, 3 labs, we have found one thing, have Nigerians been told that, okay, when that happened and a particular lab or some labs were fingered, were they sanctioned? Were their licenses withdrawn? Were people persecuted? So that's, first of all, sends a deterrent to the rest of the stakeholders that nobody dares, that government is serious this time around. But truly, and just like most things that happen in Nigeria, the danger in COVID-19 is that you can make some of those fraudulent, give out those fraudulent documents or certificates, and it may not hurt. But COVID-19 does not know any age.
Let me hold you for a minute to take our last caller on the show this morning. Good morning, Mazi Okorofo.
Good morning, Mr. My brother, doctor. You see, I want to find out from doctor. The vaccine we are talking about this morning, some people are saying that people that have a major ailment, that they are not supposed to this vaccine. Whether it's a true story or false story, only the medical expert can say. But the question now is this, my brother, listen, this sort of vaccine, the publicity or the enlightenment program or the awareness program have not gone anywhere. If the federal government wants us to take all the cronies of this on the Nigeria should be, all the 774 local government should be briefed. We have youth that are supposed to go around and pass all this message. But we have all those things. But we are talking about vaccines. But COVID-19, but the thing was that the variants, second phase, but other people have done another third phase of variants. So we don't know which one is it the first COVID-19 or the variants two or the third one? What do we do? Because there's a lot of confusion in the market because Nigerians have to be briefed and say that the age and the people with serious ailments, you know them, doctor, you know them. I'm not coming to teach you, at least if you have to know exactly because it's not a question of bringing vaccine. Now, you see the top, we take it like, there, we are our head of state and device. Now, what happened to the man in the village who is farming? Will the vaccine reach him? When you say 20 million vaccine, will it go down? When Nigeria is over 300 million. Thank you very much. But what I'm saying that President Trump, at least he has tried, has exposed so many things. There is 3 things in America: black, white, and racist. We should choose one. The spread in terms of politics is not here. That's what caused about American issue. It's going around the whole world. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you for your contribution. We're told that even with the second phase, where 32 million doses are going to be procured, it will only serve about 20% of the nation's population. So I think it's about just getting the priority right, those who are most vulnerable and those who we think should get it first. But you were making reference to the fake certificates. I think it is a reflection of the rot in the system, the same way people get fake driver's license and every other document. It's just that this one has fatal consequences.
Massive, and it can disrupt an economy completely because we can't manage the current emergency the U.S. and Co. are facing. We don't have the capacity. And the governor went to the president yesterday to make case for more support to have oxygen centers and all that.
Yes.
Because I saw the publication from the CMD of Lutz telling people that there is no facility that can accommodate this mass number of people getting infected. So back to what the man says, some of the questions he asked. Right now, the feedback is that pregnant women are not to be administered with the vaccine because when a vaccine is being developed, they administer it on certain populations. So pregnant women were exempted. And this is not like the end of the road. It's okay. For almost 9 months, the global society or global audience, the international community never knew a way around this issue. Everybody was dazed. But this is something to mitigate. It's not even a cure. So the best cure is to apply all those protocols.
And that's what mentioned. We have to go now. Pascal Achunine. There has to be a way you pronounce that.
Achunine.
Achunine.
Yes.
Thank you very much for your contribution.
Pleasure.
Public expert.
So stay safe.
Yes, indeed.
And if you must not non-essential travel, non-essential movement, avoid it.
Stay back at home.
Thank you.
It's just that you have to consider the people's economy as well. And we're also hoping that government will make the process of getting the certificates very seamless, and so that patriotic Nigerians will go the right way. A big thank you to everyone who watched today. Thank God it's Friday. We'll be back on Monday, God willing. I am Nifemi Oguntoye.
At TVC News, wherever the big news story is happening, we're geared up to break it. TVC News, first